Okay, so as you heard, this webinar is being recorded. If some emergency you need to leave partway through this evening's webinar, then please do get back in touch with us and we can send you a recording of the rest of the slides. You are welcome to use the question and answer function throughout this training course. I will do my best to answer as many of the questions as I can on here tonight, but it is myself facilitating on my own. So if I don't get around to answering all your questions in the time that we have this evening, then we will get back to you at the earliest opportunity in order to answer those for you. As I said a few moments ago as well, this is the fourth in a series of 5 webinars being funded by Opportunity Area. The idea is that parents need just as much, if not more, support than the young people that we are traditionally known to be working with. So welcome along to tonight's webinar. The other ones in this series so far have focused around things like challenging behaviours that are displayed by our children, parenting tips for when we aren't feeling physically or mentally well, and parenting traps and how to avoid them. All of these previous webinars are available on our website, so please do go back and have a listen to them and a watch at your convenience if you haven't joined us on those. The final one in this series will be, I will do my best. I'm not sure I've got a link handy to that. I've just been asked about a link to that. If I'm not able to, if you go to the ymcatrinity.org.uk website, you will find it signposted there, or give us an email into the office tomorrow and one of us can ping that link across to you. The final one, as I said, will be called Building Resilience in Children. So that may well be something that you also want to join us for. That's taking place on the 6th of July. So on its way into the summer holidays, if that's something that you would be interested in, please do join us for that as well. Okay, some of this I've already started to cover, for example, the question and answer function. It's good to see that that is working. If you wish to put something in the chat, I will be asking you for various examples of things tonight, so please do use that as well. Now, this webinar is designed to equip you guys with tools and the knowledge of how you can help both yourself, firstly, and your child or children as well. It's intended to be non-judgmental, so please try not to berate yourselves throughout the course of this. We're all doing our best with the skills and the tools that we have available to us at any given time, and isn't it testament to the fact that you're trying to learn from your experience by being here on this webinar tonight. So as we go through the strategies and tips that we've got to share with you tonight, please do have yourselves and your child or children in mind, because of course, who knows them better than yourselves? This webinar will be thinking about the following objectives. We want to try and help you to explore situations in your lives that make it difficult to stay calm. That's kind of the first port of call, if you like. And actually, what does it look like when we aren't calm? That can be different for different people. And actually, some of this evening's content can feel quite worrisome. It can be quite uncomfortable to think about some of this. So please do make sure that you're taking care of yourselves as well. If you do need to step away from the screen at any point, feel free to do that, and then do come back and join us again. As I said, this is designed to be non-judgmental and not about laying blame with ourselves at all. Why is being calm useful both to ourselves and to our children? And finally, thinking about what emotional regulation is, and how to actually achieve it as well. So what I'd like you straight away to do is have a think about what does it look like when we are not calm. You can choose to keep that just for yourselves, just thinking for yourselves, or pop things in the chat, as I said. As I've already said as well, this is different for different people. So, you know, what my not calm looks like may well be very different to the next person's. And they're not always necessarily the very stereotypical actions or behaviors either. So have a think for yourselves. I'll be quiet in a moment and give you some reflection time for about a minute. And if you would like to add something into the chat, like I said, feel free to do so. Okay, so hopefully you've got some ideas in mind. Nobody has put anything in the chat, which is absolutely fine. So I'll give you some of the examples that we came up with. When we are not calm, we may well be quite reactive to a given situation or to words that somebody may well use. We may be quite listless, forgetful, those feelings of overwhelm. Definitely one for something that I've seen displayed in myself is that snappy, you know, kind of just straight away coming in with either a remark or saying something that maybe later on is going to not sit well with myself. Being irritable, shouting, and perhaps becoming irrational as well. I wonder how many of those you sort of brought to the forefront of your mind as you were thinking about that. Now, what I want to start with is removing all of the stress about being a perfect parent. That's not what this evening is about. We all make mistakes. We're human after all, you know. Some things we will get right and some things we will get wrong. And if you're anything like me, we are usually sat halfway in between those two things. It may well be right, but I'm not always sure that I feel that it is right. But recognizing even the pressures that demand our attention on a daily basis is the first step to starting to give ourselves a little bit more of a sense of realism, I think. You know, by accepting that we are good enough parents, we give ourselves and our children a better chance of actually doing well, rather than being a self-critic or overly critical of ourselves. No one can be peaceful all of the time. Human conflict, unfortunately, is a natural part of every human relationship that we have. Now, sometimes every parent will get angry with their children. What this webinar will not do for you is turn you into this serene parent who will never ever lose their temper. You know, different and complex emotions come into play, so we need to be mindful of that. But yes, there will be room for improvement, both in our communication and our parenting skills. But let's be honest, there's no such thing as a perfect parent. We're all doing the best, as I said, that we can in the time that we've got and the skills and the tools that we've got. Now, hopefully, you can take a few more strategies and tools and tips away with you today. The undercurrent of our parenting also is very much influenced by the way that we've been brought up. For some people, they almost model themselves entirely on their own parents' parenting style. And for others of us, that can feel a little bit more uncomfortable, and that might not necessarily be the same way that we want to bring up our own children. Okay, so again, a little bit of thinking for yourselves. It might be useful, rather than just having these ideas in your head, if you've got a piece of paper or some post-it notes handy, just writing some of this down so that you can later reflect on some of these concepts as well. So I'll give you another minute perhaps to think about situations that you find difficult to stay calm in. Everybody will have a different situation that can make it difficult or nigh on impossible to stay calm. You know, I know there's 2 particular times of day when my children were younger that I just knew they were going to be difficult, whether that was between the 2 of them interacting or whether that was them and myself interacting, but I knew they were going to be points of stress. As I said, I'll stop talking again, give you just a minute to think of those situations for yourself. If you would like to pop them in the chat, feel free. Having too much to do, definitely, yeah. And that doesn't even necessarily always include our children, unfortunately, does it? It can be a million and one things to do with, say, work, other roles, other hats that we wear. But yeah, I'll stop for a moment. I know it can be difficult to actually think if I keep talking, so I'll pause for a moment. Okay. I did say only a moment. I can't keep quiet for too long, unfortunately. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of thinking time. Being tired at the end of a day is, yeah, an absolute classic one, isn't it? And then it begins again, you know, a good night's sleep and we think it will start again. I'm just looking at this picture a little bit more closely, actually, guys. That vacuum cleaner, for example, I don't know what era this is meant to be replicating, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a vacuum cleaner of that design and model quite so often. And also, why has she got a handbag? Anyway, I will digress, so I will come back from that. Yeah, thank you for those of you that are sharing some of those situations. Other trigger points, if you like, that may be around, and a classic one for our family was always the getting ready for school in the mornings, when everybody has differing needs and everybody is seemingly going in a different direction. Stubbornness, absolute flat refusal to do something, and it could be from the smallest thing that you can think of, you know, putting their shoes on, to something much, much bigger, but not doing it. How do we manage that? Those kind of episodes where tantrums or their kind of emotions are frayed, something as simple as your newborn just continually crying, sibling rivalry, that constant bickering and arguing between 2 or 3 or 4 of them, you know, depending on the makeup of your household. Now, our days are so full of ups and downs. In 1 minute, we can be, you know, absolutely super excited about something, and the next minute feels like we are absolutely being knocked down with the amount of stress and tasks that we have to do. Being pulled in lots of different directions means that our patience is constantly being tested at every turn. Now, stress will build up over time. So having a regular way to let off steam, or have something that is just for us, or something that makes us feel calmer, relaxed, perhaps something that is a way of us just letting go of some of those negative emotions, can be really useful. And some examples, you know, might be walking with a friend, exercising, you know, practicing yoga, maybe dancing with the children, reading a book, knitting, anything really, anything that is for you. And different people will have different ways. You know, they say exercise is good for everyone, but actually for some people that's just not how they relax. That's actually more of a stress than it is for other people. So you need to find the thing that works for you, or the things that work for you. Whatever it is, it means you can hopefully stop that bubbling over of the stress bucket as often as it would do if we don't have something. And sometimes it can feel counterproductive. You know, I'm so busy. Have I really got time to go for a run? We do a lot of work with schools and colleges, and actually that is sometimes one of the biggest barriers to staff well-being is the amount of things that they have to do for their work. And they'll say, I haven't got time to go for a run or to go swimming. My argument is that, okay, at first it may feel like we don't have that time, but if you build that into your daily routine, you are going to be more productive because you've given yourself that break and given yourself that step away from the stressful situations that we're in. So it is worth bearing that in mind, in that, yeah, it can feel, as I said, counterproductive, but in the long run, it will definitely make that difference. So whether you're dealing with children back chatting, refusing, or that never ending, you know, sibling kind of, he said, she said, she said, he said, he did this, knowing how to stay calm yourselves is what can help our children the most. Now, scientific research shows us that our arousal levels, are contagious. So if you want to de-escalate a situation, in this instance, a parental kind of, you know, parent-child situation, but actually this will work in situations of work, confrontation of any kind, really, then it's important to regulate your own emotions first. It's one of probably the most underestimated tools that we have at our disposal. And what I'm gonna do is watch a video with you on the next slide to demonstrate what I mean here. Please be aware the sound on this video does start quite abruptly, so I don't want it to startle you. And also, you know, given that we're all possibly in different situations, if there's a child or a puppy sat on your lap, this may well startle them. And if you can't hear the sound, please somebody pop it in the chat. It's only a 2-minute video, so if we do need to go back and find it on YouTube, then I can do that. But just let me know if you have any issues with the technology, please.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting.
Let me take you back to the early 1990s. Sleepy little laboratory in Parma, Italy, and scientists had a MRI brain scanning machine on a macaque monkey as the macaque monkey was trying to open up a nut. They wanted to see how the neurons would light up.
Sorry, I have paused that because there is no sound. Is everybody? Oh, sorry, it's back. Okay, I'll stop. Might take that back a couple of seconds. Sorry, guys.
Let me take you back to the early 1990s. Sleepy little laboratory in Parma, Italy, and scientists had a MRI brain scanning machine on a macaque monkey as the macaque monkey was trying to open up a nut. They wanted to see how the neurons would light up. So the monkey's trying to open up the nut, the neurons light up. And just by serendipity, and this is how science sometimes happens, a human being walked into the laboratory. I don't know if it was by mistake, and he was hungry. He saw the nuts and opened up one of the nuts and tried to crack it open. The macaque monkey was totally shocked because who was this invader in his laboratory? And he didn't move. He just gazed at this human trying to open up the nut, just like he had done a few seconds earlier. And then the scientist looked on the MRI brain scanner. The same exact neurons were lighting up when he observed the human being opening the nut as when the monkey opened the nut. And the scientists had not a clue as to what this was. They thought the MRI machine had broken. They then began to put MRI brain scanning machines on other primates, especially chimpanzees with our big neocortex. Then they went to humans. And what they found over and over again is something called mirror neurons. And that is that we are apparently soft-wired, some of the primates, all humans. We suspect elephants. We're not sure about dolphins and dogs. We've just begun. But all humans are soft-wired with mirror neurons so that if I'm observing you, your anger, your frustration, your sense of rejection, your joy, whatever it is, and I can feel what you're doing, the same neurons will light up in me as if I'm having that experience myself. Now, this isn't all that unusual. We know if a spider goes up someone's arm and I'm observing it going up your arm, I'm going to get a creepy feeling. We take this for granted, but we are actually soft-wired to actually experience another's plight as if we are experiencing ourselves. But mirror neurons are just the beginning of a whole range of research going on in neuropsychology and brain research and in child development that suggests that we are actually soft-wired not for aggression and violence and self-interest and utilitarianism, that we are actually soft-wired for sociability, attachment, as John Bowlby might have said, affection, companionship, and that the first drive is the drive to actually belong. It's an empathic drive.
Okay, apologies if you couldn't hear it for technological reasons our end, but I can make sure that that link does come out with you. It's just mirror neurons on YouTube, and actually there's lots of different videos and research on it, so it is well worth having a watch. Just the thought bubbles around that monkey every single time get me. They make me chuckle. I'm like, how did you know that's what the monkey was thinking? But anyway, that's not the point of the video. So thinking about that research that goes with it, it basically implies that if we don't regulate our own energy, then we can make any given situation worse. These mirror neurons, they help us to mimic the behavior and feelings of others. Some of us are more empathic than others, and we have a harder time of it because it's almost difficult to gauge what is us and what is somebody else's stuff. But, you know, if our emotional state is quite heightened, then our children's emotional state rises with it to meet ours, and that can intensify the situation. It will then take us longer to find a way to get back to a place of calm and resolution. And as parents, we all know about that knock-on effect that is that guilt and that self-talk that then comes about and lets us know yet again that we're far from perfect and we need to do something about it. Now, structure is something that is crucial to children. So much of life can be unpredictable, that consistency, which is how they see structure, even though they might bat against it, is actually really key, even more so in today's climate, given the last couple of years. One thing that your child shouldn't probably be worrying about is how is mum or dad going to react today, or my caregiver. So this kind of anxiety can be really provoking for children. Modeling self-regulation in our behavior means that hopefully our children are learning how to regulate themselves, and that can be really key. The number of times I think back to when my children were younger and I would be expecting them to behave in a way that I know I hadn't the last time I was angry, and that kind of double standard will very quickly come back because they're very astute and they will remind us that actually that's not how we behave. Now, self-regulation is noticing the feelings and the sensations that go on in our body. It means that you become conscious of what is going on for you so that you can use the rational and the thinking part of your brain to decide what action to take. So hopefully we respond more wisely rather than being sort of hijacked, if you like, by our emotions. Another way to think of it is self-control, you know, putting that chocolate biscuit back in the tin and choosing some fruit instead. That is self-regulation at work. How many of us practice it in that way is up for debate. But taking responsibility of our own emotions allows us to respond a bit more like a grown-up rather than joining our child and their kind of whatever behavior that they are showing or emotion that they are allowing themselves to get swept away with. You know, we have that rational part of our brain that has developed. They haven't necessarily got that yet. So maintaining our own mood and giving ourselves that kind of support in order to make a positive change or action to something, this is going to be really helpful. Self-regulation is also important because it allows us to connect and act in a way that's in accordance with our values, so that our social conscience can come into play and we can express ourselves appropriately. Now, one thing that self-regulation is not is numbing or repressing our feelings. This will just never work. Repressed emotions don't just disappear. They are forced out of our conscious mind for the time being, and they're no longer then under our control. They'll be stored away in our bodies and carried around until they might resurface in an uncontrolled manner, resulting in either unregulated outbursts, or they can make us sick. Repressed anger will lead to things like depression, or feeling physically ill, or aches and pains in places that we don't have an answer for. So that isn't what self-regulation is. We do need to be able to express those emotions. We just have to gauge where and when we do that, and the manner in which we do it, which I will talk to you about. Blaming our child or children, obviously, or our partner or spouse, this is also not what self-regulation is, because it's not taking ownership of it, and pretending that we feel something. Happiness, for example, when we're actually super cross, isn't the answer either. As I said, we do need to express that emotion. It's just the way in which we do it. So the first step to regulating is identifying our emotions. Now, mental health and emotions and how we feel is much more spoken about today than it was as I grew up. Obviously, I don't know everyone's background, but I'm going to hazard a guess that it's a similar story across the board. So being able to identify and name them is the first step. Emotions are usually identified with I am. So I am angry, and I am sad, and I am overly anxious or worried. We aren't actually our emotions. That's something that we're feeling. So if we change that narrative to I feel, so I feel angry, I feel anxious, I feel sad, instead of being swept up by the emotion and actually becoming it, what we're doing is naming the emotion and making our minds aware that this is a temporary state. If you like, mute yourselves, and which you all probably are anyway, because we're on a webinar, but say that to yourself. So say that you feel an emotion rather than I am that. So rather than I am angry, say to yourselves, I feel angry. And that immediately makes it feel a little bit more temporary and like something I can do something about, perhaps, and certainly makes me feel like I'm more in control of it. Anger actually is the one that we're going to focus on, because we're thinking about staying calm in a situation with our children. So it tends to manifest as anger, but this can be other things as well. But in terms of anger, it's always giving us a message. It isn't that we have just come up with this emotion and that's the be all and end all. The signal is anger, but usually it means that there's something else going on and something needs to change. There's either a threat, or there's a frustration, a rage, an irritation about something. The physical sensations that maybe present in anger are sweating palms, or tension in the body, holding your shoulders like this, trembling, shortened breath, so that actually the oxygen isn't flowing very well either. The common reactions that we might see from somebody that we say is angry are shouting, perhaps physically lashing out at others, and feeling resentful. So the message of emotion, as I said, is that something needs to change. It might be in that particular situation, but if this is an overarching anger that we carry with us all of the time, or a lot of the time, then something needs to change within our lives. Anger is the body's fight response. It mobilizes you to protect yourself, and it's usually a secondary response to a primary fear, such as getting hurt or maybe being rejected. So anger is the body's way of protecting you from that feeling of vulnerability, perhaps, or another scarier emotion that is going on for you. Everyone experiences anger differently. I've given you some of the kind of ways that it might present, the sweating palms, the clenching your fists, etc. Just some more signals, if you like, that might go on in your body, you know, sort of raised temperature or a lowered temperature. It will depend. It's a very individual way of being. We can't say that all of these symptoms will happen if you are angry. And sometimes they're so subtle that you might overlook them completely and not realize what's happening. Now, knowing your warning signs is another way that we can start to regulate ourselves. So there are these different stages, which I'm looking at the time and thinking, perhaps I probably don't need to go into in too much detail at the moment. But needless to say that what there will be is an escalation of things happening. There is a set stage where we can put a stop to this. And the better we are at noticing what happens sensation-wise in our body at different stages, the better we can start to get to put something in place that interrupts that escalation, if you like. So I'll leave that on there for a moment, but what I won't do is talk you through it, because I imagine you'd much rather I got to the strategies stage of it. Okay, so knowing the moments or the situations that can trigger us is useful. You can then start to make a plan. If you are leaving everything to chance, so without a plan, you're very much in the moment, and then you are forced to react to whatever is going on or what you're feeling at the time. If, for example, you know you've had a busy day, you know, somebody earlier said getting really tired by the end of the day, and I know that that's a situation that can be quite a trigger point for stress and not being calm. You've had a busy day, you've got to make dinner, you know one of the children needs help with their homework, then is it possible to put a plan in place that is, I will help you after dinner, or while the dinner is cooking, maybe you and I sit in a separate room from the other siblings so that you've got that time. You know, each individual household and personality will have a different plan, so it's not a one size fits all again. But can you put something in place? You know, if, for example, you know that after school is a flashpoint for your child or children, can you put something in place? Do they need to always go to a quiet place when they come home? Do they need to maybe have a snack rather than going straight into their homework regime or whatever it might be? But having a plan can allow you to stay grounded and have a sense of control. Now, word of caution, it won't always go according to plan, but at least you've put something in place that allows you to perhaps have a chance at getting through that flashpoint and then the next one and the next one, rather than the whole day has been a series of flashpoints, and by the time that one after school hits, yeah, you have had it. There's no way that you're coming back from that. So the key to regulating your emotions is the sensations, knowing what they are, and thinking about, you know, coming up with different interruption points. So as you start to feel those sensations in your body, we can start to put things into place. So pausing for the time being. More often than not, you know, you or your child are not in immediate danger. Now, this does come with, obviously, sometimes there are younger children and are running towards the road. I don't mean where there actually is, you know, a very real emergency. But more often than not, that is not the case. So your first responsibility really is to calm yourself down, because of what we've just been talking about with the mirror neurons. You know that perhaps right now interacting with your child is not the best thing to do, because actually you've already got yourself into this heightened state. So then you need to make that conscious choice of, actually, I'm going to take a step back, because feelings aren't fact. So if you make that decision of, I'm not going to react to this feeling right now, because you've also named it and said to yourself, I am feeling angry, not I am angry. So then you can take yourself away from that situation and bring yourself back down into a more regulated place. reframing things can work wonders as well. Consider the last time that you were really furious with your child. Think about what you thought of the situation and how it made you feel. Now think about how you might be able to reframe that. So children moaning and they're getting ready for school, or they're, you know, doing that he said, she said thing. And you're thinking, why don't they just leave each other alone? And that would make my life so much simpler. Why are they even interacting with one another? You begin to get irritated and you start clenching your fists. But if we reframe that with, what are they trying to tell me? What's their behavior telling me? Because behavior is a language in itself. Maybe they're a bit anxious about something at school today, or maybe they haven't slept so well. And then maybe you can do something about that. Not that they haven't slept well today, but maybe you can ensure that tonight they have a better night's sleep, or you can talk to them about what might be happening for them at school, which isn't traditionally what we want to do. We want to just get them ready, get to school, I've got to get to work, or whatever the next thing is. And actually, if we treat it more as a problem solving exercise rather than reacting to the situation, that can help us. Now, I've already talked about the way that we mention emotions to ourselves, but actually having a mantra can be really useful as well. You know, this isn't an emergency. I can deal with this in a moment, or I can handle this, or they're trying to tell me something. Let me try and work out what it is. You know, just something that takes the behavior and the reaction to it and interrupts it and goes, hang on, let's think about this. You know, you could even go with, I'm a good enough parent, and I got this. So, you know, I've dealt with situations like this before. These are all just mantras running around my head at the moment, so I will stop saying that. But bringing in an awareness to your body and starting to bring it back down into a sense of calm will be definitely very good for you. And in the long run, as I said, you're modeling that behavior to them as well. Now, I did say earlier about anger. It does need a place to go. So it's not something that we can just sit on, because it produces these hormones in our body, and it needs to kind of have an out, which is usually when the adrenaline goes up, we shout or lash out, and that's the anger kind of needing to be expressed. But that adrenaline that it has just released into your body does need to move through the body so that it isn't something that turns into, you know, long-term stress. You can do things like dance around the room. Trust me, the children will look at you if they've been bickering. That will be one thing that will stop them from doing that and wonder what on earth is going on with you. Or slightly less, you know, out there methods are splashing your face with cold water to bring your body temperature down, drinking some cold water, eating ice, just shaking your whole body out, stamping your feet. You know, it might feel a bit toddler-esque, but that's exactly why they do it, because it's kind of a very natural way of getting rid of that adrenaline. If you can, and you've caught yourself early enough, maybe taking some deep breath in and blowing out through your mouth as you imagine yourself releasing all of that fear and the anger in your body. Even hugging yourself, believe it or not, can kind of start to release some of the calmer and hormones in your body, and allow you to know that you're safe and that you're okay. Tapping is another one. Tapping your whole body, again, can feel quite strange when you're not used to it, but it allows that adrenaline, and as I said, to pass through your body. If you're really struggling and you can't regulate, and you know that something is going to happen at this point, walk away. You know, it's perfectly acceptable to say to your child, I'm feeling really angry right now. Not you're making me feel angry, because that's back to the blaming of the child, but I feel really angry right now, and I need to go and manage my anger. I quite often tell my children, Mummy's not coping very well right now. I need to go and manage my anger, and I'm probably going to go and have a little cry. Crying is a great therapeutic tool. I know I sound like I'm possibly, you know, making light of it, but I promise you, I do it on a regular basis, and I prefer that to the dancing around the room by myself. So, you know, and I do have teenagers and they're not going to dance with me. So work with what will work for your family and your kind of setup, as I say. You can always go back to your child as long as they are safe once you've walked away. You obviously need to manage that. Always go back and help to repair that relationship. But what you haven't got then is that intensity of the guilt of, oh, I snapped again. You're not going to be able to have a productive conversation until you've gone and brought yourself back down. So you might as well leave it for a later time. Other strategies, longer term strategies, so ones that we can use outside of that particular situation where, you know, that conflict is happening. I already spoke to you about having something for yourself, something that happens maybe once a week or once a day, whatever that is for you. Really keeping that ring fenced and safeguarded for yourself and not allowing anything else to be in the way. But there is also other techniques such as mindfulness. Now, when I use that word, sometimes people just switch off completely, but if you can just bear with me for 30 more seconds, it doesn't mean sitting and meditating. It can be, but that isn't necessarily what mindfulness is. It's about focusing your awareness on the here and the now. So paying attention to the sensations and the feelings and what's happening right now. You know, how often do we do things like cooking or driving somewhere or making the packed lunches, and we're doing it whilst thinking about a million other things that we need to do? So even starting with something as simple as brushing your teeth, but being aware of the sensations as they're happening. So focusing on the taste of the toothpaste, the sensations around your mouth, and what's my arm doing as I'm, trust me, it brings you into the now. And for that 2 minutes, as we should all be brushing for, that allows your brain to just not think about the to-do list. And that can be really, really useful. You can then build on that mindfulness. In a moment, I am going to invite you to join me in a minute of meditation. If you would care to join in, then that would be great. But deep breathing, that's another one. You know, it's something we do all of the time. And I'm sure many of you will have heard that actually we're never using the full capacity of our lungs. So just taking a few short, deep breaths, even if you only do it first thing in the morning, just bringing that stress level down once or twice a day can have a long-term impact. I know it sounds ludicrous, but it really can, because your stress bucket has just dropped some of that stress because you've taken a moment for yourself. And actually, when we think about it, how much of our stress bucket is actually of the thinking about what's happening in the future, what's happened in the past. There's not a lot of it that is exactly about this moment right now. So breathing is something else that can bring our attention to the here and now. And positive self-talk. There is a self-critic that lives inside all of us. It comes from a good place, a place of trying to achieve our best and to better ourselves and to always reach the next benchmark. But again, that's a lot to do with our upbringing of, you know, the next thing and the next thing. You know, for most of us, our parents were petrified that we weren't going to make it, or we're always going to be this layabout teenagers, which is my worry for my teenagers at the moment. But, you know, it came from a good place for most of us. But we have then internalized that self-critic, and we will always be thinking, I can't do this, I'm no good as a parent, this is really hard. If that's all we hear all of the time, that very quickly becomes our belief. And again, it's a feeling, not a fact. But showing kindness to ourselves and compassion, again, it is something that we perhaps don't model enough to our children. You know, I've certainly been guilty of saying to them, don't talk to yourself like that. And then I think, wait a minute, that's exactly how I talk to myself. So if you can, stop and take note of how it is that you talk to yourself. And that's, you know, another longer term strategy. If we've spoken to ourselves in a particular way for, let's say, 25, 35, 40 years, it takes a lot of doing it the opposite way for that to become a a way of life. Okay, so as I said, just a really short, less than a minute probably, meditation. If you would like to join in, please do. If not, then use that minute or so to just think about some of the things that we've covered tonight already. So if you, like I say, completely voluntary. If you wish to join in, do so. And if not, then just spend a couple of minutes thinking about what strategies you may want to take away and start to use straight away. Yeah. So if you can just settle into your seat, and if you are perhaps lying down somewhere, just bring yourself up to a seated position. The important thing is to be able to feel contact with the floor, with your feet, and maybe whatever you're sitting on with your bottom. So just bring your attention to that sense of touch of where you are grounded, whether that be in a chair, a sofa, a bed, and where your feet are touching, hopefully the floor, carpeted, wooden, tiled. And just sit up. So sit up a little bit straighter, but not making yourself kind of stiff and rigid. Just take a nice kind of look at your posture and bring yourself up. And make sure your feet are completely touching the ground, so your legs aren't crossed. Keeping your eyes open so that you can take in the surroundings of where you are. And then just soften your gaze a little bit so you're not necessarily staring intently at anything. Now I invite you to connect with your breath, if you will. Pay light attention to the breath as it flows in and as you release. And remember, you're just keeping your gaze nice and light. And then as you start to settle into the breathing, whether you are breathing in through your nose or your mouth, it is unimportant as long as you are taking your attention to your breath and your surroundings, of course. And then what I'd like you to do is start to think about taking some counts with that breath. So as we breathe in, I will begin the counting, and if you can just follow that, that would be great. So empty your lungs, because what we're going to do is take a breath in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Try and maintain that count if you can. And as thoughts arise, because they will, just do what you're doing with your surroundings, which is noticing them, but you're not engaging. So try not to let any of the thoughts stick with your mind and take you on a journey. Just allow the thought to be there and go, oh. And the next one may arise, but you keep your attention on that breath if you can. And when you are ready, you can bring yourself out of that very short, as I said, meditation, and just bring your attention back to the screen, and we will move on. And that's literally all you need to begin with. If this is not something you've engaged with before, then something like a minute's worth of meditation or deep breathing is all that you need to begin with. Setting yourselves up to succeed is what I want you to do, rather than putting unrealistic expectations on ourselves. Okay, so another long-term strategy is this thing called an internal locus of control. We can't always control our circumstances, but how we respond to them is well within our reach. So those that have something called an internal locus of control feel that they have a choice in their lives and they have control over their circumstances. Others of us have something called an external locus of control, and then importantly we feel that we are at the mercy of external events, and that's when those frustrations and worries about vulnerability can arise. So by starting to develop an optimism, you start to see strengths rather than focusing on your weaknesses. You can start by looking on the brighter side of 1 or 2 things in a day. It doesn't mean that negative things never happen or pretending that everything is okay. But what it is accepting that there is both good and bad in life. So that's, definitely another tool that you can use. My children did get to a point where they were like, will you stop silver lining everything? And I was like, oh yeah, perhaps I've taken that step too far. But when we know that there have been dips, can we remember that actually there was an up as well not that long ago? And maintaining your sense of humor, learning to laugh even at life's frustrations. And laughter is the best form of medicine, as they say. So those that are utilizing their humor more often will tend to experience stress at a slightly decreased level. And again, it doesn't mean that everything is rose tinted or nothing bad ever happens, but it's just our way of reacting to things. And exercise, as I said at the beginning, I know this is a controversial one because for some people that is more stressful than anything, but even just taking a walk around the back garden, if that's as far as we can manage it, then that is a step in the right direction. Now, asking for help, this is an important one. We do at times need help. So if things like you are struggling on a regular basis, and you know that the techniques I've been talking about today are not going to cut it, or you try them and that still doesn't shift things, then that is definitely a sign that you probably need to seek further help. Or if you know that you want to make changes, but you don't know how, or none of these seem feasible or manageable, then that is probably another sign that we need to seek more support than what we here are able to with that webinar. So the first port of call would be to go and speak to your GP, is our suggestion. So just thinking about barriers to asking for help. Now, I've already mentioned your inner critical voice. Remember, that's there. It came from a good place, but in today's day and age, it doesn't necessarily still serve that purpose. So think about, how were you brought up, and what's your inner critical voice saying to you? In terms of upbringing, were you brought up to seek help from others? Was that seen as a weakness, or was that something that was normalized and actually completely acceptable? There may be other barriers as well. I've already mentioned some of these, but just for you to ponder as to whether any of these ring true for yourselves. The stigma of asking for help, as I said, upbringing may be something to do with that. We should do things for ourselves. Depending on your background. Being perceived as a burden, or as not a success, being seen as incompetent. The fear of what others may think, or perhaps not receiving that help when you've had enough courage even to ask for it, to then be rejected. That can feel like, actually, let's not bother in the first place. Seeing it as a sign of weakness. Maybe finances, thinking about, sometimes help is available, but it requires a certain amount of output firstly, and also don't know what help, or don't know, how to seek that help, or who to ask about it, can all be barriers that bring us around to a place where actually we just don't bother. And I always say that self-care is not selfish, and I think asking for help is one of those things that actually is about self-care, but we don't do enough of it for various reasons, and this is just a handful of them here for you tonight. That brings us very neatly to the kind of question and answer section. Essentially, I've got a couple of slides left with just a bit more information for you. But if you did have any questions here and right now that you would like to ask, please do pop it in the chat. That's your fair warning that we're coming to the end of the webinar. So as I said, if I can't answer them here today, I will come back to you. And actually, if you pop it in the chat and would rather I came back to you individually, then we can do that for you as well. The next webinar, as I have already said, is on the 6th of July, and it's called Building Resilience in Our Children. So if you would like to sign up for that, please do. What I'm going to do, hopefully, she says, is pop into the chat a survey link to an evaluation form. What I will do, guys, just stop the recording for that.